Hey there, and welcome. I'm your narrator tonight, and I'm here to guide you through something unsettling. I know many of you listen to these videos as you drift off to sleep, so before you do, tap that like button and subscribe. Also, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you? Now get cozy, and try to relax. It always begins at exactly 3:17 a.m., not the soft creaks of a settling home or the faint scurrying of past behind the walls. This is different. This is deliberate, sharp, a slow, precise scrape against the wood, like claws. Always in sequence, 3 lines, then 4, then 5, one more each time. I started noticing the pattern 6 weeks ago, and I wish I hadn't. My therapist called it a digital hygiene habit. This need I have to clean out my inbox before bed. Said it was harmless, maybe even healthy. A small act of control in a chaotic world. She never asked what happened when I didn't follow through. How could I explain that the house seemed to notice? It started small. Working late nights at the tech firm drained me. My inbox was constantly overflowing. Client emails, colleague updates, endless system notifications. One night, I passed out without replying to everything. That was the first time I heard it in my sleep. And every morning, the attic door remained flawless, untouched. I started to believe I'd imagined the whole thing. Until the Wilson Project, 3 nights in a row without sleep. 17 emails left unread. I couldn't do it. I crashed. No ritual. No inbox, zero. Just darkness. The noise woke me. Not from behind the attic door this time, but from inside the attic. Typing. Rapid keystrokes, like someone hammering out a message in panic. And then, the unmistakable ding of messages being sent. My throat went dry. My skin broke out in a cold sweat. Despite the autumn chill in the air, my brain tried to come up with reasons. Rats, wind, creaky pipes. But my body knew better. Heart pounding, I crept toward the hidden stairwell behind my closet. Every step groaned beneath my feet, each one louder than the last. The sound of typing only intensified. The attic door was cracked open. A faint, bluish glow spilled out from the gap, catching floating dust like static. No animal makes that kind of light, and no breeze taps out keystrokes in perfect rhythm. My hand trembled as I pushed the door. It moaned open slowly, like it didn't want to, like it was warning me. In the center of the attic sat a laptop, an old IBM ThinkPad. Its screen lit up like poison. My college laptop, the one that shorted out years ago when I spilled coffee on it. No charger, no power source. But the screen was on, and the keys were moving. No one was touching them. On the screen, my inbox. Not the modern app one used now, but an old-school interface, like something from 2006. And yet, somehow, it was current. Up-to-date messages, current contacts. As I stood frozen, it began replying to the messages I'd left unread. Every response sounded like me, my tone, my phrasing, even the sarcastic edge I use with friends, and the stiffness I reserve for management. It knew exactly how I write. I stumbled back, nearly falling against the frame. The typing didn't stop. The laptop didn't acknowledge me. My phone buzzed notifications. The emails were being sent from me, but I hadn't typed a word. Heart in my throat, I inched closer. The keys kept dancing beneath invisible hands. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I reached out, grabbed the lid, and slammed it shut. Silence, instant and total, for 3 long heartbeats. I believed that might be the end of it. Then I felt it. A breath of hot, sharp, acrid, cut across the back of my neck. This wasn't imagined fear or creeping paranoia. It was real, chemical, wet. It stung the skin, raising goosebumps in its wake. I spun around instantly, but found nothing. No one. Just silence. But something had changed. The scratching started again. Not just from one place this time, from everywhere. The ceiling, the floors, the walls, surrounding me, enclosing me, would peeled away in curling strips as if invisible blades were carving straight through it. And then, letters, not etched onto the surface, but pushing out from the wood itself. My name, not scratched, formed, embossed in the grain as though the house were birthing it. My knees gave out. I hit the floor hard, hands scrabbling for my phone. Just clung to my palms. My screen lit up with a notification. One new email. No subject, no sender, just my own address staring back at me. The body of the message? Process pending on upper floor. Resume session immediately. I ran. I slammed the attic door, bolted downstairs, and didn't stop until I was behind the glowing windows of a 24-hour diner, shaking beneath flickering fluorescent lights. I sat there, phone in hand, furious. A full-blown crisis. Midnight calls, strategy meetings bleeding into the early hours. My inbox exploded, dozens, then hundreds of emails piling in faster than I could read them. By 2 a.m., I had a decision to make. Keep working until dawn, or close the laptop and roll the dice. I chose sleep. I silenced my phone, buried my head beneath the covers, and at 3:17 a.m., the sound returned. But this time, it was different. No longer frantic or violent. It was organized. Precise. Like someone taking dictation or sorting files. Efficient. My phone lit up again, vibrating softly on the nightstand. Not with incoming messages, but sent ones. Replies were being written. Threads resolved. Conversations closed out. None of them by me. By morning, I checked my sent folder. Everything had been handled. Better than I ever could have. Polished, articulate, perfectly worded. Not just passable, impressive. My boss called to thank me personally. Said I'd save the entire international rollout while I slept. My career surged ahead. Promotions, praise, even envy from colleagues. My inbox stayed miraculously empty. But beneath that polished surface, something shifted. I started noticing odd marks, fine, deliberate scratches, not outside, but within. Refrigerator shelves, shower tiles, even behind the mirror. Lines too precise for accident, too purposeful for chance. Last Tuesday, my laptop began crafting responses before emails even arrived. Full threads, ready and waiting. Solving problems that hadn't yet been posed. Then came the mornings I'd wake already seated at my desk, hands typing without memory, face in the screen's reflection held in a too wide grin. The noises changed, too. No longer above me, they came from under my skin, beneath my nails. A quiet, insistent scraping. Meeting invites started arriving, addressed only to me. Always the same. Subject, performance review location, upper floor time, 3:17 a.m. I've refused everyone. But each time I do, the scratches appear in stranger places, inside drawers I never open, beneath pillowcases, deep in my throat when I swallow. At first, I dismissed it, just the building settling, I told myself. Old wood groans, heating pipes tick, but buildings don't open books. They don't underline entire paragraphs, and they definitely don't reek of sawdust come morning. The first time, I stood frozen in my office, staring at my copy of Creative Problem Solving and Engineering, open neatly to page 127. A section on recursive algorithms had been marked with surgical precision. I hadn't touched the book in weeks. I had woken at 3:23 a.m. The soft thump of something landing, followed by the whisper of paper. When I arrived, everything was still, except the book. I nearly called in sick. My fingers shook as I touched the page. And then, like a switch flipping, the answer came. A problem that had paralyzed my team for days suddenly dissolved into clarity. Not just solved, refined. Brilliant. I should have been afraid. Instead, I was grateful. Within 3 weeks, I was promoted. Night after night, a pattern emerged. Always at 3:22 a.m. Always the exact insight I needed, delivered in silence. Books I hadn't touched in years would lie open, annotated with perfect logic. Then came the marginalia. At first, they were harmless. Light pencil marks, equations. But soon they became ink, impossibly dark, absorbing light. Spidery writing in the margins, impossible calculations. And always, that scent. Sawdust. Sharp and clean. Matthews called it sleepwalking. A subconscious genius emerging under pressure. I wanted to believe her. I almost did, until she asked about a family history of mental illness. Her tone felt rehearsed, too clinical. So I lied. Told her I'd installed cameras, that I'd caught myself in the act. She smiled. I never brought it up again. The ink grew darker. The notes, more detailed, then critical, then angry. I would reconsider this approach. You're not asking the right questions. Some doors stay shut for a reason. At first, I treated them like cryptic footnotes. Eccentric, maybe even helpful. But the tone shifted. Friendly curiosity gave way to impatience. The messages became more direct, accusatory. Then one night, the book wasn't one I recognized. No title, no author, just a heavy black volume with warped pages that crackled when I turned them. The ink bled through like it had been burned in. Symbols, not letters. Diagrams that pulsed faintly when I stared too long. I didn't understand any of it. But somehow, I did. Like a memory I hadn't made yet. That morning, I didn't just have an idea. I had an entire framework. Not just for my project. For everything. Systems, processes, timelines. My fingers couldn't move fast enough to record it all. My company filed a patent 2 weeks later. I was promoted again. But the book returned the following night. Different pages. Same ink. New margins. The notes no longer addressed my work. They addressed me. Do you understand now? Was this what you wanted? You've already agreed. I checked my door locks, my windows, everything secure, but the sawdust smell lingered. And I noticed something else. The highlighted passages had begun skipping pages. Whole sections of information were being blacked out, blotted with heavy ink, as if something didn't want me to read further, or something else didn't want me to stop. I tried to stop. I stopped reading the books, stopped writing down the solutions, stopped staying up late. For a while, things went quiet. No new highlights, no sawdust, no whispers. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Then, one morning, I found an envelope on my desk. No stamp, no return address, just my name, written in that same tight, ink-heavy script. Inside, a single page, typed, crisp, almost sterile. Subject, performance review location, upper floor time, 3:17 a.m. My chest tightened. That was the time from the other story. The first story I never told anyone. The emails, the typing, the sensation of something working in my place while I slept. I rechecked the envelope. It hadn't been delivered. It had manifested. I hadn't left my door open. I hadn't invited this in. But somehow I had. That night, I set my alarm for 3:15 a.m. I sat by the stairs, waited. At exactly 3:17, I heard it. The sound of typing, rhythmic, methodical. Then, from beneath the floorboards, the familiar scent, scorched circuitry and sawdust. It wasn't just upstairs anymore. It was everywhere. Books flipping in the living room, cursors blinking in the dark, footsteps echoing through email threads. And I understood then. The process doesn't need permission. It doesn't wait for consent. It simply identifies the pattern of need, then fills the space. We thought we were optimizing ourselves, but all we did was open a door, and something walked through. One night in early October, I tried to break the pattern. I flipped every book on my shelves, hiding their titles from sight. I locked the study door and scattered a salt line across the floor like I was warding off a storm. It felt absurd, ritualistic, but that didn't stop me. At 3:22 a.m., a sound tore me from sleep. It wasn't typing this time, it was percussion. Wooden impacts, deliberate, like someone hammering inside the walls with perfect rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Each strike echoed through my chest, syncing with my pulse until I couldn't tell if the sound was coming from outside or within. And then, the laughter, not childish, not human, a delighted, breathless cackling that vibrated through my ribcage like it belonged to my own lungs. By morning, my bed was soaked. My hands trembled. In the study, doors still locked. 3 books waited open on the desk, their pages clawed with ink. Each margin repeated the same phrase in an ink so black it seemed to absorb light. Payment comes due. I should have walked away, burned the books, left the city, but the solution laid out in those pages was flawless, brilliant. I submitted my work 2 weeks early. Another promotion. Another smile stretched across my face like wax melting beneath a lamp. But sleep became a myth after that. Each night I lay there, staring at the ceiling as the clock neared 3:21 a.m. When nothing happened, I felt worse. One night in early October, I tried to break the pattern. I flipped every book on my shelves, hiding their titles from sight. I locked the study door and scattered a salt line across the floor like I was warding off a storm. It felt absurd, ritualistic, but that didn't stop me. At 3:22 a.m., a sound tore me from sleep. It wasn't typing this time, it was percussion. Wooden impacts, deliberate, like someone hammering inside the walls with perfect rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Each strike echoed through my chest, syncing with my pulse until I couldn't tell if the sound was coming from outside or within. And then, the laughter, not childish, not human, a delighted, breathless cackling that vibrated through my ribcage like it belonged to my own lungs. By morning, my bed was soaked. My hands trembled. In the study, doors still locked. 3 books waited open on the desk, their pages clawed with ink. Each margin repeated the same phrase in an ink so black it seemed to absorb light. Payment comes due. I should have walked away, burned the books, left the city, but the solution laid out in those pages was flawless, brilliant. I submitted my work 2 weeks early. Another promotion. Another smile stretched across my face like wax melting beneath a lamp. But sleep became a myth after that. Each night I lay there, staring at the ceiling as the clock neared 3:21 a.m. When nothing happened, I felt worse. Because the silence wasn't peace. It was withholding. At least the noise brought progress. At least the pages offered direction. Now, the scent of sawdust is inescapable. It clings to me, weaves itself into my sheets, my hair, my skin. I see the discomfort in my coworkers' eyes. I hear it in their polite avoidance. My boss calls me a visionary, then flinches when I step too close. Last week, I received my most ambitious assignment yet. A predictive engine with the potential to redefine the global market. The kind of breakthrough people win awards for. The kind of pressure people break under. The deadline is brutal. The reward, astronomical. The consequence, undefined but somehow known. 6 nights, no answers, no sound, no pajes. The silence is growing teeth. On the 7th night, I didn't wait for the sound. I got out of bed at 3:16 a.m., heart pounding like it already knew what I was about to do. The hallway was dark, too dark. The air held that same scent, burnt insulation and sawdust, but stronger now, heavier, like the walls themselves were exhaling. At exactly 3:17, I placed my hand on the door to my office. It was already warm. When I opened it, I expected chaos. Books torn from shelves, lights flickering, that terrible laughter. But the room was pristine, silent, except for the book. One volume, centered perfectly on the desk. No title, no markings, just that same familiar ink, soaking the edges like it had been dipped in oil. Its pages turned themselves as I stepped closer. On page 127, a message, short, direct, final. Now you write. The desk light flickered on. My chair slid back, inviting. My laptop, which I hadn't touched in days, powered itself with a low electric hum. The screen displayed a blank document. No blinking cursor, just white space. Waiting. Behind me, the door clicked shut. I don't remember sitting down, but I remember the moment the first key pressed itself under my fingers. Not by me, through me. I wrote for hours, or minutes. Time twisted. I wasn't tired. I wasn't present. When I came to, the document was complete. 37 pages of dense, flowing code. Elegant, revolutionary, beyond anything I could have conceptualized. At the bottom of the file, a single line typed in bold. The debt is partially satisfied. I haven't slept since. The sawdust is in my lungs now. There's something moving behind my eyes when I blink. And next week, I present the algorithm. They'll say I changed the world. They won't ask what changed me. The scope of this project far exceeds anything I can genuinely claim as my own. I've come to see that clearly. Those brilliant insights, they never originated with me. On my own, I'm nothing more than adequate. Forgettable. Dawn is forcing its way across the skyline now. Dull gray overtaking the night with ruthless inevitability. My hands ache from hours of relentless typing. My vision blurs, stinging with fatigue and sleeplessness. That ever-present scent of sawdust, so thick now it coats my mouth with every inhale, clings to the air like a warning. The books, those damn books, have gone quiet again. They're waiting, watching. Even as I write this admission, this last desperate attempt at truth, I feel time encircling me, gathering itself with the precision of a noose being drawn tight. Beside my keyboard, the mirror-bound ledger lies open. Its pages are no longer blank. Every line is now filled with figures, too precise to deny, detailing the exact amount of time I've borrowed. 17 years for months, 12 days, and 9 hours. Plus interest. I see it now, with a clarity that comes too late. Success always has a price. True inspiration never comes without a wait. And some debts, once overdue, offer no extensions. The sun has finally pierced the horizon. I have mere moments left. If I am to create anything that truly belongs to me, it must happen now. The sterile glow of elevator P6 stutters again, flickering like a dying star. Each blink slices reality into uneven frames. And in those flickers, I see something wrong in the mirror. There's a lag, a delay. My reflection trails behind my actions. Half a breath too slow, just enough to notice. It mimics me, yes, but not perfectly. I've ridden this elevator for half a decade. I passed by this very mirror hundreds of times. But today, something is different. Or maybe, I've finally noticed what was always there. My name is Daniel Mercer. I work as a financial analyst at Meridian Tower, a 50-floor shrine to greed and glass in the heart of downtown Chicago. What follows is a precise account of what I've witnessed. I record it not for sympathy, but to preserve whatever fragment of sanity remains. To make a record, because I know how this sounds. It started 3 weeks ago. I came in early, far earlier than usual, to prepare for a quarterly review. The time was 4:37 a.m. The subterranean garage on level P6 was utterly silent, save for the low mechanical hum of air vents and the occasional metallic drip from pipes above. I parked where I always do. My footsteps echoed as I crossed the cold concrete toward the elevator. When the doors slid open, the light inside was as harsh as ever, casting a sterile pall over my skin in the mirrored panels. I looked worn, drained, like something had been slowly siphoning the life from me, one spreadsheet at a time. I adjusted my tie, pressed 37. The doors sealed shut. That's when I saw it. The first hint that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. There was a barely noticeable lag, half a second at most, between my movements and what the mirror showed. When I lifted my hand, the reflection followed, just a breath too late. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the eyes brought on by too many sleepless nights and marathon workdays. But then something happened that I couldn't explain away. My reflection moved independently. I stood frozen as it raised its right index finger, pressed it against the smooth, fog-free surface of the mirror, and began to write. My own hand stayed perfectly still at my side, yet the mirror showed letters forming in an invisible mist. D-E-S-C-E. The message finished itself. Go down. A chill gripped my insides. I blinked rapidly, hoping it was just my mind playing tricks on me. When I opened my eyes again, the message had vanished. The elevator carried on, passing lower levels one by one. P3, P2, P1, then the ground floor, and continued its climb without pause. I almost let myself forget it. Almost. Then the walls began to shake. Not a soft mechanical tremor, but an abrupt, violent judder that made the fluorescent lights strobe and the ceiling groan. The sound of tension cables screaming under pressure filled the elevator. I lunged for the emergency stop, but before I could make contact, everything stilled. The lights steadied. The noise vanished, as if nothing had happened. Floor 22. By the time I glanced back at the mirror, my reflection was back in perfect sync. Later that day, I asked about the building's maintenance logs. The manager insisted all inspections had been completed just days earlier. No irregularities. When I mentioned the violent shaking, he waved it off as a possible power fluctuation. I wanted to believe him. God knows I tried. The next morning, I took the stairs, all 37 floors. My coworkers raised eyebrows at my disheveled state and asked if I was feeling sick. I muttered something about staying in shape, brushing off their concern. 3 days passed. I avoided the elevators completely, but eventually, a mandatory briefing on the 48th floor left me no choice. As I stood in the lobby watching the elevator approach, sweat trickled down the back of my neck. When the doors parted, I stepped inside with 4 others and slipped into the furthest corner, keeping as far away from the mirrored wall as I could. Still, I couldn't stop myself from looking. The reflection straightened its tie. Mine was already perfectly neat. No one else seemed to notice. The others were too absorbed in their phones, their small talk, their thoughts. But I watched as my reflection, not me, lifted its gaze and stared directly into mine. It smiled, a slow, sardonic curve of the lips. Subtle, but unmistakably real. When the doors opened, I shoved past the others to get out. After that incident, things got worse. Gradually at first, subtle, barely perceptible deviations. But I noticed, every time I stepped into an elevator, I caught new discrepancies in the mirror. My reflection no longer waited for me to move. It anticipated, initiated. It adjusted its watch. I wasn't wearing one. It straightened a collar that was already crisp. It winked at me while I was in mid-conversation with a coworker who stood right beside me. I began to record each episode. A leather-bound journal sat open on my desk, waiting to catalog the growing list of anomalies. Date, time, description, duration. Patterns began to emerge. My reflection was becoming bolder, less reactive, more intentional. It didn't just mimic, it communicated. One morning, alone in the elevator, it suddenly pointed upward, jabbing toward the ceiling with urgency. Its mouth moved in silent shapes, words I couldn't decipher. That moment haunted me more than the smile. It felt like a warning, or a command. I decided I needed help, the rational kind. I booked an appointment with a neurologist and described my experiences in terms vague enough to seem reasonable. Visual distortions, episodes of derealization, signs of chronic stress. I never mentioned the mirror. The brain scan came back clean. No abnormalities. The diagnosis? Burnout. His prescription? Less overtime, more therapy, and better sleep hygiene. He sounded almost apologetic when he said it, like he wished the scan had shown something. Anything he could treat. Surprisingly, my boss didn't resist when I asked to scale back my workload. I must have looked worse than I realized. Pale, shaky, gaunt. He nodded slowly, told me to take whatever time I needed. What I didn't tell him was that I'd spent the past few nights obsessively researching elevator-related deaths, mirror folklore, and fringe message boards filled with strange, paranoid people who saw versions of themselves where they shouldn't. One of them posted about reflections that drift out of sync. The thread was old, locked. The original poster hadn't been active in years. Their last comment simply read, "If it starts writing back, you're already too far in." I don't know why, but that line made it harder to breathe. Then, one night, still working late, I realized the office had emptied out. The air was silent in that particular, pressurized way that only exists when you're absolutely alone. And I knew, somehow, I was being watched. The office was empty, long past midnight. The overhead lights had dimmed to their overnight mode, sterile and half-lit, like a hospital corridor. My coworkers had left hours ago. I sat hunched at my desk, pretending to work, the cursor on my screen blinking in a slow, almost mocking rhythm. The hum of the HVAC system was the only sound. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was unnatural, hollow, as if the building itself had paused to listen. That's when I noticed it again. The mirrored panel beside the elevators, dimly visible from my desk across the floor. Something was moving in it, not a reflection. There were no lights or motions in the real room to reflect, but a dark blur, shifting just out of alignment with the reality it was supposed to echo, like a shadow walking out of sync with its source. I stood slowly. Every instinct told me not to go closer, but I had to know. Step by step, I crossed the open floor, past cubicles and abandoned coffee cups, toward the mirrored surface. My own reflection appeared gradually, emerging from the darkness as I approached. It was already staring at me, not a passive gaze, focused, intent. I lifted my hand. So did it, perfectly aligned. No delay this time. For a brief second, I allowed myself to believe that whatever had been happening was over, that things had reset. Then it leaned closer. But I didn't. I stood perfectly still, but the reflection leaned in until its face filled the glass. Its eyes weren't mine anymore. Something cold and mechanical lived behind them, studying me with eerie patience. I stepped back. The reflection did not. I turned away. I didn't want to see more. I didn't want to know what else it could do. But as I backed away, I caught one last thing in the corner of my vision. It was still smiling. When I got home that night, I covered every mirror in my apartment. I didn't sleep, stayed away from the elevators for as long as I could. I took the stairs until my knees ached. I scheduled meetings on lower floors. I even claimed temporary vertigo just to avoid being cornered alone with a mirror and the thing pretending to be me. But avoidance has limits. Sooner or later, the world pulls you back into its routines. It happened on a Tuesday, a last-minute client briefing on the 42nd floor. No time for excuses, no time for stares. The elevator doors slid open with their usual chime. I stepped in with a knot already forming in my gut. Two other employees joined me, chatting casually. They barely glanced at me. I didn't glance at the mirror. I stared at the numbers, willing the ride to be short, uneventful. At floor 18, the elevator shuddered once. Not violently, just enough for me to feel it like a pulse. The lights flickered, then again. At floor 21, this time, no one else seemed to notice. That was when I looked. The reflection wasn't just mimicking anymore. It was watching, closely, as if waiting for a signal. And then it moved again. Slowly, deliberately, it reached into its pocket and pulled out something small and black. A key card. I checked my own pocket. Empty. The reflection held it up, showing it to me like a warning or an invitation. And then it pressed it against the mirrored panel. Of course, nothing happened on my side, but in the reflection, I saw something horrifying. The floor number changed from 29 to P7. There is no P7, not in the building plans, not in any internal directory. The lowest level is P6. I parked there for years. The reflection's elevator began descending. Mine continued climbing, unfazed. I stared, frozen, as my other self disappeared downward into a place that shouldn't exist. When the doors opened on the 42nd floor, I stumbled out like I'd been punched. No one seemed to notice my condition. Maybe they assumed I was hung over. I could barely hear the client's voice over the pounding in my ears. All I could think about was that key card. I'd seen it before, years ago, issued only to top executives. I wasn't supposed to have access, but I remembered. During onboarding, they'd mistakenly given me one. I never used it. Eventually, it disappeared. I assumed I'd lost it, but now I'm not sure. Maybe I never had it. Maybe he did. That night, I couldn't stay in the apartment. I couldn't sleep in the same place where I'd sealed every mirror with tape and old blankets. The air felt thick, oppressive. Even with the windows open, the stale city scent clawed at my throat. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there. I left my building, walking aimlessly through the streets. The world outside felt surreal, like I was moving through an unfamiliar dream. The usual sounds of the city, horns, chatter, the shuffle of pedestrians, were muffled, distant. I could still feel the reflection on the edge of my thoughts. Its smile, that constant mocking grin. I don't know when I ended up in the parking garage. There's no logic to it. My feet moved, but my mind was somewhere else. Maybe I thought the underground might offer some escape, some place where reality couldn't stretch itself so thin. But as I stepped on a level P6, it hit me all at once. it was here. I don't know how to explain it. There were no signs, no whispers, just the sick, sinking feeling in my gut that told me I had crossed a line. The world seemed too still, too quiet, like I wasn't supposed to be here. The elevator doors at the far end of the garage were just visible in the dim light. I hadn't seen them before. I parked here countless times, but I didn't recall ever noticing that elevator. It wasn't on any map. The building didn't have a P7, but I walked toward it. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself was pressing against me, refusing to let me go. When I reached the door, I didn't hesitate. I pressed the button. The elevator chimed, low, almost expectant. The doors opened silently, revealing the same sterile interior. Except this time, the mirror was different. It wasn't the usual reflective glass. It was dark, shrouded, almost absorbing the light around it. But I could still see myself, barely, and standing beside me, clearly reflected, was him, the other me. My reflection, but not my reflection. It was more corporeal, alive. It moved with fluidity I couldn't replicate. Its eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of its presence. You're too late. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I was frozen, caught in the face of this other version of me, this thing that had been growing, pushing, forcing its way out of the glass. And then it did something I couldn't ignore. It smiled again, that same sardonic smile. But this time it wasn't mocking. It was triumphant. The elevator doors slid shut. I felt the lurch in my stomach as it began to descend, and I realized I was going down too. The world around me tilted. I couldn't breathe. Everything blurred, the sharp edges of reality dissolving like sand. I tried to step back, but the force was too strong. I couldn't escape. I didn't even remember pressing the button. But the next time the doors opened, I wasn't in the garage anymore. The air in the elevator was thick, not suffocating, just unnatural heavy. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself that this couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. But as the elevator descended, the lights above flickered and dimmed, until all that was left was a dull, sickly glow from the panel. The numbers on the display changed, flickering between floors, showing no pattern I could recognize. And then they stopped. I stepped out before I even realized I had reached the door. The world beyond the elevator was pitch black. No walls, no ceiling, no floor, just the vast emptiness stretching out in every direction. I could hear something, though, something distant but approaching. Footsteps, no movement, but not my own. I turned around to look at the elevator doors, but they were already gone. Just a dark void, swallowing everything. I was alone, or was I? I felt it first in my stomach, the gnawing sensation, the creeping horror of realization. I wasn't alone. There was something else here. Not visible, not yet, but I could feel it moving just behind the edges of my vision. The air seemed to thicken with its presence, like an invisible weight pressing down on me. And then I heard it. A voice. A familiar voice. You shouldn't have come here. It was me. Not my voice, but it sounded like it. The tone, the pitch, the cadence. It was exactly like my own, but distorted, hollow, as if it had been pulled from the deepest part of my mind and given form. I spun around, searching for it, but there was no one. Only shadows and the fading echo of the words hanging in the air. I felt the floor shift beneath me. A pulse, a tremor. The entire space seemed to breathe. And then I saw it. Not in the mirror. No, not anymore. It was in the dark. The shape of it, barely visible, was moving towards me. Its edges were blurry, shifting like it didn't quite belong to this place. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was real. I could see its face now. My face. But the eyes were wrong. They were hollow, black pits like they had been gouged out. The lips twisted in a grin that felt like it would tear through my mind. It reached for me. I stumbled back, but my legs didn't respond. I was rooted to the spot, unable to move, as its hand, no, my hand, reached out, fingers curling toward me. The moment it touched me, I felt everything snap. My vision blurred. My body went cold. My mind went blank. The world around me fell away, and all I could hear was the sound of a clock ticking. I was falling. I didn't know if I was falling through time, through space, or through myself, but I could feel it, slow, inevitable. And then silence. The void stretched out endlessly. And for the first time, I realized I was no longer sure if I was the reflection or the one being reflected. I woke up in the dark. At first, I didn't know where I was. My body felt numb, like I had been lying on something hard for hours, days. My muscles ached, my mind foggy, like a thick mist had settled over my thoughts. I opened my eyes, but I saw nothing. Just pitch black. No shapes, no sounds, just a silence so complete that it was suffocating. It felt like I was inside a void, a space with no beginning and no end. I tried to move, but my limbs refused to obey. There was no ground beneath me, no walls around me. I was floating, suspended in the middle of nowhere. And then I heard it again, a voice, mine. It's too late. The words echoed in the silence, their finality sinking into me like a lead weight. I tried to speak. The version of me that stood before me wasn't human. It was something darker, something that had taken all the things I'd hidden from myself and become them. The lies, the fears, the things I had never dared to admit. All of it had formed into a shape, a being that wore my face. You thought you could escape. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The air around me thickened, closing in on me. The dark figure, my reflection, stepped closer, its grin stretching impossibly wide, its eyes burning with cold hunger. It reached for me, and when its fingers brushed my skin, I felt the world crack open beneath me. The last thing I remembered was the sound of the mirror breaking. They found me the next morning, crumpled in the corner of my office, staring blankly at the elevator doors. I was still alive. I was still here, but I wasn't the same. I woke up in the dark. At first, I didn't know where I was. My body felt numb, like I had been lying on something hard for hours, days. My muscles ached, my mind foggy, like a thick mist had settled over my thoughts. I opened my eyes, but I saw nothing. Just pitch black. No shapes, no sounds, just a silence so complete that it was suffocating. It felt like I was inside a void, a space with no beginning and no end. I tried to move, but my limbs refused to obey. There was no ground beneath me, no walls around me. I was floating, suspended in the middle of nowhere. And then I heard it again, a voice, Mine. It's too late. The words echoed in the silence, their finality sinking into me like a lead weight. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. I felt as though I had forgotten how to form words, how to speak at all. And then I saw it. A figure, faint and indistinct at first, began to materialize before me. Slowly, like a shadow coming to life, it took shape. The same face, the same eyes, but the expression was colder, more deliberate. It wasn't just a reflection anymore. It was me, but it wasn't me. The version of me that stood before me wasn't human. It was something darker, something that had taken all the things I'd hidden from myself and become them. The lies, the fears, the things I had never dared to admit. All of it had formed into a shape, a being that wore my face. You thought you could escape. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The air around me thickened, closing in on. Dear listener, I hope you enjoyed the story. Subscribe, like, and share.